Welcome to Best Practices for Storage and Receiving for Distribution Sites. Excited to have you all here and go through some additional information about storage, receiving, and communication with partners specifically for distribution sites within this program. So, just to start off, my name is Jessica Hernandez. I'm the Director of Operations here at supplybank.org. So within my role at supplybank.org, I oversee our warehousing, logistics, and procurement. So those are really the items that I'm going to be working with you on when it comes to training, starting with this training and a few others that we have scheduled throughout the rest of March and into April. As you may have seen upon entering the training, today's session is being recorded and it will be posted on ACF's website along with the slides. Feel free to drop any questions in the chat as we go through this presentation. Additionally, we will have some opportunities throughout to kind of come off mute and share any questions that you may have as we're going through the material. So, just to start off, I wanted to go over our agenda. We're going to be talking about a few different topics today. The first of which is identifying storage space within your organization. We'll then move to receiving orders, managing inventory, communication with partners, and then finally opening it up for any discussion or questions at the end. So I did want to highlight that beyond these agenda items, all of this information can really be implemented even if you've started receiving deliveries. So storage, receiving, et cetera, are really iterative processes. So both our organization, supplybank.org, and our partners regularly evaluate their processes and needs to make sure we're utilizing our space and resources effectively. So even if your organization's already received maybe one or two deliveries and started their distribution, you can definitely take this back today and maybe make some changes or continue to enhance your own processes. So with that, we're going to start off with identifying storage space. So there's a wide variety of storage options available, and what you're utilizing for your organization is likely to be unique. Obviously, different organizations are going to take different approaches depending upon what they have access to. So some sites may have access to a dedicated warehouse or storage facility on site for diaper storage. Other organizations might not be as fortunate and will need to be a little bit more creative with their storage options. So, some kind of potential alternatives we wanted to highlight were maybe an empty office, conference room space, portable storage unit, or potentially renting offsite storage space. So, I just wanted to highlight again to keep in mind that today's training is really focused on storage needs for distribution sites. So, if your organization is more focused on warehousing or longer term storage, we'll be covering that more in the training that's scheduled for April 4th. So if that's more the information that you're looking for and you're not already registered for the April 4th training, I would suggest going ahead and doing so. So just wanted to see if anyone in the group would maybe be willing to come off mute and share a little bit about what your core storage space currently looks like. This is someone who could have a more traditional storage space or maybe someone who's using what would be considered a creative approach at this point.
Hi, I'm April Smith from HR Cap, and currently we have a dedicated space for the diapers. As far as there's a whole wall with cabinets already attached to it. So I got them separated by sizes, and then the wipes are in a different spot, and then we have an actual closet that's just full of, overflow of diapers and wipes and formula
That's
too.
great. Great. Thank you for sharing, April. Anyone else like to share? No? Great. All right. We'll move on then. But thank you, April, for sharing that information. All right. So things to consider when selecting your storage space. So we have an acronym that make up four criteria, an acronym of SAFE. Any guesses on what the different parts of this acronym might stand for? Feel free to drop them in the chat or come off mute.
Maybe the S is like supply.
Good guess, but not quite. So the S actually stands for size. Then we have our A for access, F for frequency, and then E for elements. So we're going to run through a little bit more information related to each parts of this acronym. So, first off is size. How much space will you need? So, this is something that can be determined in partnership with your procurement partner, AKA the organization that's providing diapers to you. So, working in partnership with this organization, you should be able to understand the following items: how often you'll be receiving product, will the product be palletized? And then based off the number of children you'll be serving, how large will your delivery be? So they should be able to give you specifics in terms of if you're planning to serve 100 families a month, what does that translate to in terms of cases or packs of diapers and wipes? And then working with you to understand, all right, so 100 families, that probably means two packs, or excuse me, two pallets of diapers.
Hey, David.
And so what does that look like in terms of what your
I am
storage needs
wonderful. How are you
are?
doing? I was actually getting ready to call
So
you at some point today. I had a gentleman call me yesterday.
sorry, just one moment. Just please make sure to keep yourselves muted throughout the presentation, just so everyone's able to hear the content that's being shared, unless you're asking a question and coming off mute. So going back to pallets. So, if you're receiving 2 pallets, 4 pallets, etc., pallets are generally 40 inches by 48 inches and typically not taller than 60 inches. However, your procurement partner might be using a non-standard pallet or may have a little bit of a different way of distributing their diapers. So it really is best to check with them and understand from them how they'll be delivering it and what that looks like. So next, the A is access. So access can be broken down into 2 parts: who has access to the space and how easy is it to access the space. So who has access? Best practice would be to limit access to the space. This keeps your inventory secure and limits your risk of lost or stolen product. Ideally, you would want to store items in a locked space with only 1 or 2 staff members having the key or combination to access the items. If your organization does have a dedicated warehouse with staff, they likely have existing inventory access or controls in place. The next part of access is how easy is it to access the space. So ease of access comes into play with both distribution and deliveries. So depending upon where you're planning to distribute product, ideally you want to pick a storage space that can be easily accessed by staff to distribute products, whether you're distributing daily or once a month. With access, you also want to consider how the products are getting from, let's say, your parking lot into the storage space that you've identified. So, for example, if the delivery is being dropped in the parking lot and then your organization staff has to put it away, you are not going to want to pick a location that's up 2 flights of stairs and on the other side of the building, because that's just going to add additional time and labor in terms of getting the product into your space. However, if let's say your delivery driver is able to bring the pallets inside for you, you might be able to pick a location that's closer to the parking lot. Additionally, you do want to consider at that point then, can pallets actually fit through the doors into your building, and will they be able to get in through there and then kind of move her throughout your space to actually reach the storage location. So next we have frequency. How often are you going to need to access the inventory or be receiving deliveries? So if you're distributing on a daily basis with families coming in continuously for services and then receiving product, it might make sense to try to locate your storage space close to where you'll be distributing. However, if your organization is only distributing once a month, a more out of the way location might be fine, as you won't be accessing the product as on a regular basis. Similarly, with receiving deliveries, if your only reasonable storage option is an office on the 3rd floor and it's going to require 3 staff members to spend 2 hours putting the delivery away, how often is this delivery going to happen? If it's, once a week, you probably want to rethink your storage option, as that's not likely a good use of staff time on a weekly basis. However, if you're only receiving your delivery once every other month, there's an argument to be made that that would be an acceptable solution, and then you would be able to utilize that, more out of the way space. And then our final uh, part of the acronym, elements. So while temperature control isn't needed for diapers, you do want to be mindful of the elements when selecting your storage location. It's recommended that you store your diapers in an area protected from extreme heat and humidity and away from other products that have fragrances. So, diapers should ideally be in a dry storage area away from direct sunlight and extreme heat. Extreme heat meaning you really want your space to be 85 degrees or less. So, depending upon the weather in your area, particularly in the summer months, and let's say you're looking at maybe an external sort of storage space, you may want to consider one with air conditioning. So these are kind of just some general requirements for diapers and wipes. I would suggest checking with your procurement partner to see if the products that they're providing have more specific requirements in terms of how they need to be stored safely. Great. So before we move on to our next section, which is receiving, I just wanted to come back to our original acronym of SAFE. So we have size, access, frequency, and elements. So just wanted to see if there were any questions at this time specifically regarding storage space before we kind of move on to receiving. No, I'm taking the silence as meaning there's no questions at this point. As Christian said, feel free to come off mute or drop them in the chat. We will have opportunities at other places in the presentation to ask questions if you think of something that's not coming to mind right now. So next we're going to talk about receiving orders. So with this, there are a few things to consider. So with receiving orders, unfortunately, I don't have a fun acronym to utilize with this one. It contains one vowel and there's a Q, which having a Q made it, I could not come up with a word that would work. So, our first item that we want to consider is responsible staff. Prior to receiving any deliveries, it's important to determine who will be responsible for receiving the delivery from the driver. Ideally, this staff member is familiar with the program and has flexibility in their schedule to step away for a period of time to review the delivery. So, depending upon the size of your delivery and the storage capabilities of your facility, you might have a situation where multiple staff members are needed to put the delivery away. And so this is completely fine and definitely something that we've seen other organizations do, but you really do want to designate one point person who's responsible for that overall process and for receiving the delivery. And then keep in mind for the remainder of this process, the delivery driver may or may not actually be present. So this will depend on who's making the delivery and what instructions they have, which we'll talk about a little bit further down. So the next step is our queue quantity. Prior to the delivery arriving, your responsible staff person needs to make sure they know the quantity of items that are arriving. So while delivery drivers should have paperwork with them that staff are going to need to sign off on, it's important to have a copy of your own request to make sure you're receiving the quantity you expected. So if you're missing items or have too many items, the delivery driver may or may not be able to assist. Most times, delivery drivers probably aren't going to have extra product on their truck that they can just give you to make up for the fact that items are missing. So we'll talk about this a little bit later in communication, but at that point, you're likely going to want to reach out to your procurement. And so we do recommend having a copy of your actual order with you for when the delivery arrives. Um, and so going through and actually checking, the quantity versus what arrived is going to take some time. And the responsible staff member will want to review the order in full. Another thing to keep in mind is depending upon the packaging that's being used, it may or may not be immediately obvious what each item is. So, for example, let's say you requested 100 packs of size 4 diapers, but if your procurement partner places 4 packs into a box to make up a case, while you requested 100 packs, you may actually only be receiving 25 cases. So this is information that your procurement partner should be able to provide you ahead of time, but it's definitely something to keep in mind when verifying the quantities of your delivery. So next up, we have damage. So while you're looking at your order and reviewing it, you're going to want to inspect it for damage. So this can be done while checking the quantity or after the quantity check is complete. A small of damage may be normal or acceptable. So, a little like ding on a box or something like that, it's definitely not out of the ordinary. But if products are completely crushed and damaged, you should reject the delivery in full. We have some pictures on the next slide of what that looks like, but this is just important to keep in mind because external damage to a box potentially means internal damage to the product, particularly if it's severe damage. And so you're not going to want to risk the quality of those products if you're receiving items that are completely damaged. So you'll want to send those back with the driver. All right, next up, organize. So once you've fully checked the order for quantity and inspected for damage, you'll then want to organize the order. So this is the process by which you put the order away. So depending upon the role of the delivery driver in your organization, they may or may not be moving that into the building for you. And so you may have already started the organization process just depending upon what that looks like. Additionally, organization can look like a few different things. It could be putting pallets away in a designated space, or it could be something like what April shared earlier in terms of putting items away in a cabinet and a closet and kind of making the most of the space that's available to you. All right, so the last step in our receiving process is log. So this is two parts. Number one, logging any delivery paperwork that the driver provided you, and then also logging the amount of inventory you received. So depending upon your delivery partner's procedures, you should either receive a hard copy of paperwork or an email copy of paperwork. We recommend that you scan and save this in a folder with any other documents you have related to the diaper demonstration pilot. It's good for record keeping and just being able to reference back to in case there's an issue in the future. Finally, you'll want to log the total inventory received as part of your inventory tracking system, which we'll discuss in the next section. So as I mentioned, here are some examples of kind of some severely damaged product. I think more than likely, none of you are going to run into a situation where you're receiving something that looks like this with really damaged boxes or, pallets of product that have completely toppled over. But we just kind of wanted to show this so you understand what that potentially looks like. So again, anything that arrives at your site that comes in this state should be immediately rejected. Anything that's been, crushed like these first two boxes look, that likely means we're going to have internal damage to the product inside as well. At which point, the diapers have been exposed to air and elements, and you run the risk of, other problems arising with the product. And so you don't want to take that risk, and you ultimately need to send the product back. So at this point, we're going to move on to managing inventory, but I did just want to check and see if we had any questions relating to receiving before doing so.
I have a question that I'm curious about for the folks who shared that they're partnering with food banks for storage. Are you participating in any of the receiving? So this is a question for Mary or April.
Yeah, we're partnering with the food banks, but that's literally for our food pantry. So like they don't really have anything to do with our diaper distribution per se. So I definitely will be the one that's receiving the product because it's just me and one other lady, Miss Monique, but she's over me, so I'm more than likely is going to be the one that's receiving the product and going to the food banks. But the food banks and our diaper distribution, they just completely separate. Same program but different. You know what I mean. We're going to be getting diapers from here, you know what I mean, and food from there. So
Understood. Thanks for sharing.
And ours is a little different. So we have two different food banks and then a diaper bank. And the diaper bank kind of does their own thing because they already have a whole system worked out. So they're doing their own procurement and distribution through, we're doing a home visitation model. So bringing it to the families at least once a month. And for the food bank locations, so they're partnered with a local community action agency. One, and I think it looks like Rachel's on the call, is literally next door, like they're in the same kind of complex. So it makes that a little easier, but they're keeping the longer term storage, and then individual teams are going and picking up from there. So we're not doing the initial, like taking it off the big semi truck kind of delivery side. It's more working with the food banks individually on what the home visitors and the office needs to pick up. So it's a little different.
And Mary, if I remember correctly, you have staff going like once a week or something to the food banks to pick up what they need to then take for home visitation, right?
Correct. Yep. And we're kind of in the first month of it. So we're seeing if it works better to have specific days versus we already got some feedback from one of the food banks that we can't have like 15 folks showing up at different times on different days. That's not going to, be possible. So we're trying to figure out the best way to coordinate that when we're covering a lot of rural counties and people have to drive in and out. So certainly some learning we're still doing in that realm.
Definitely. Great. Thank you both for sharing. So with that, we'll move on to managing inventory. So with that, why should you track inventory? So there are a couple different reasons why we really recommend tracking your inventory and understanding what is on site. The first one is pretty straightforward. Your procurement partner may require it. So kind of depending upon how you're submitting orders and requests to your procurement partner, they may require you to count your inventory before submitting your next order. So it may just be part of their process and what they're asking, sites that they provide diapers to do. Next, it helps you identify loss or errors. So regularly counting and checking your inventory can help prevent loss or loss of product or errors in distribution. So this is particularly important if you're distributing daily or weekly and maintaining consistent inventory on site. So sites that are doing a once a month distribution where all inventory is passed out, you're potentially likely not going to run into as many issues with, errors in distribution or maybe loss of product because you're kind of receiving and then immediately giving it to the community. So kind of an example of loss would be, let's say a family is supposed to receive 1 pack of diapers and 1 pack of wipes as part of your program. And in your last order, you received 20 packs of size 2, 20 packs of size 4, and then 40 packs of wipes. But then you go and check your inventory 2 weeks later and you discover that you only have 15 packs of size 2, 10 packs of size 4, and then only 10 packs of wipes when you should in fact have 25. So this kind of situation likely means one of two things. Either you have staff that need additional training because they're giving out 2 packs of wipes instead of only 1 pack of wipes to families, or you may have a situation where someone's taking wipes that they're not supposed to, and you're having an issue with inventory loss or potentially theft. Next, with tracking inventory, it's ultimately going to help you anticipate running out of items earlier. So regularly counting your inventory will help you better understand your needs and if you're going to potentially run out of a size. So for example, if you received 15 packs of sizes 2 through 6 at the beginning of the month, but then 3 weeks later, you're looking at your inventory and you've got 10 packs of sizes 2 through 5 left, but only 2 packs of size 6. So this could mean two different things. It could mean, all of your size 6 families have already come, received their services, picked up their diapers, and, moved on. Or it could mean that you have a sizing issue and you actually have more kids who are in size 6 diapers than you originally thought. So kind of keeping track of your inventory will help you see if there are issues like this and if you need to potentially work with your procurement partner to adjust your size allocation or if you need to request additional diapers moving forward. And so, like I mentioned earlier, if you're receiving your delivery and then immediately distributing it, tracking inventory may not be as relevant for your organization because you're not going to be holding anything on site for longer periods of time. While those sites that are consistently holding inventory and consistently distributing products on a daily or weekly basis, you are going to want to keep a closer eye on your inventory because you do have it on site and you have a higher risk of potentially running into one of these issues that I've mentioned. So now kind of how to track your inventory. So those that are working with food banks or other partners who are actually, storing the products longer term, they likely have some sort of system already in place. So it's likely a warehouse management system. And so with that, they're going to have a process that they run through for tracking and managing inventory. For sites that don't have access to a warehouse space and you're utilizing office space or some other form of storage, we do recommend setting up a simple inventory management system. This will will allow you to kind of easily see where your inventory is currently at. And this can be done either in Excel or Google Sheets, fairly straightforward. There are some softwares such as Salesforce or QuickBooks that do have capabilities for tracking inventory. However, utilizing these options does require additional training for staff and monetary investments on the part of organizations. So we actually previously worked with a partner who utilized Salesforce to track their inventory. So when sites would receive diapers, it would be logged in Salesforce, and then they would, as they distributed items, they would note, like, this family received 1 pack of size 6 diapers and 1 pack of wipes. And so it would be allocated to a specific family or child. And so while they found this to be super helpful for reporting, it did require substantial monetary and time investments for their organization to properly set up and train all of the different sites that were receiving product. And they unfortunately actually did discontinue utilizing that because of the time and investment that was related to utilizing it. And ultimately, it was just too much of a lift for their program. The next piece is regular cadence. So depending upon your distribution schedule, you should set up a regular cadence to do an inventory count. And so an inventory count is the process of counting all of your inventory at a storage location. So at a minimum, we do recommend doing this monthly, either before you submit your request to the procurement partner or a few days before your next delivery arrives. Instead of doing inventory count, you could ask staff to track and provide updates as to how many diapers they've distributed in a day or a week. But depending upon your distribution process and how many staff members you have handing out materials, this could be difficult to manage because you're going to have, let's say 10 different people giving you sheets of paper with how many diapers they've distributed, and it's not really a sustainable model. While on the flip side, doing something like an inventory count likely only requires about 20 to 30 minutes once a week or once a month to actually take the time to go through and count what you have on site. And then similarly to receiving inventory and receiving your orders, it's really important to designate a responsible staff person for counting and tracking inventory. So this allows this person to build this into their schedule and have a regular understanding of where your inventory is at. So on the screen, we have an example of a very basic tool in terms of recording the amount of inventory being delivered and then doing a count once a week on Fridays in terms of how much inventory you have on hand. So in this tool, we're not actually recording the amount that's being distributed, but instead on Fridays, looking at what's in our storage space. So with looking at this, you can see we have deliveries arriving on the 2nd and the 23rd of January, and those have been recorded in our delivery tracking section. Similarly, we're doing weekly counts on Fridays, so on the 6th, 13th, etc., to actually see what is in our space. And so this kind of allows us to see how our inventory is being depleted. And then similarly, on the 27th, after we've received this delivery on the 23rd, we can see that between what we had on the 20th and then our inventory coming in, it does look like everything we had on the 20th is still in inventory in addition to our new product being added. So this is kind of a simple tool, like I said, that allows you to basically understand just from quickly looking at a spreadsheet where your inventory is at. So your procurement partner may have some guidance on, how they manage inventory or how other partners they work with have managed inventory, and may have some guidance for you on how to set this up. Similarly, we definitely, are happy to provide guidance or work with you around your specific needs to identify a process that works best for your site. So if this is something that you'd be interested in diving a little deeper on or have, further questions, feel free to reach out to Christian. Christian, if you don't mind dropping your email in the chat, she can set up a time for you and I, or you and whoever at your organization, to connect. That way we can kind of go through what might work best for your organization and how we can, get a process set up that works for you. So with that, just wanted to see if we had any questions on managing inventory before moving on to our final topic, communication with partners. No? Great. All right. So we'll move on to communication with partners then. So this is kind of broken down into 3 different types of communication. So the first being clear communication with your procurement partner. So it's really important to understand roles, responsibilities, and expectations at the onset. This helps facilitate a healthy working relationship. So we really suggest having kind of a baseline conversation with your procurement partner to understand the following. So getting answers to all these questions will help sites understand what their expectations are prior to deliveries and then how quickly they need to communicate issues or concerns. So, kind of as we've talked about a little bit, how are products packaged and how will they be delivered? So, the example that I had given earlier, where we had 100 packs of diapers, but then they're taking the packs and putting them into cases. So, we're only actually receiving 25 cases or boxes of diapers. This is information that's important to have prior to a delivery arriving and something that your procurement partner should be able to share with you. Similarly, will product be palletized or not? So are they just delivering boxes loose or is everything coming on a pallet and wrapped? Um, Additionally, asking them to send photos ahead of time. So, getting pictures of what the diapers and wipes actually look like. So your staff kind of visually understands what products are coming and what they're going to look like. How are you communicating if there are issues? So if there are shorts or overages. So if your delivery arrives, you've done your quantity check and you're missing product, how do you communicate that? And on the flip side, say you have additional product, how do you communicate that? Along with that, how do you communicate damage? Do they want photos? Do they want a phone call, an email? What does that look like and how is that going to? And then finally, if you're having your product delivered to you, is the procurement partner themselves making that delivery? Are they working with a third party who's going to be making that delivery? Or are they actually asking that product to be picked up from their facility? So there's no delivery process, everything's actually going through a pickup process. So kind of moving on to the next phase with a delivery partner. So in some cases, this could be their procurement partner. They could have trucks and be making deliveries to sites on a regular basis, or they could be outsourcing to a third party, in which case they're hiring another organization to actually make deliveries. So talking through what kind of the delivery process will look like. So is a delivery appointment going to be set, or is there just going to be a standing delivery date? So your delivery always comes on the third Monday of every month. Understanding if drivers are going to be able to assist with putting deliveries away. This is super key, and something we've seen a lot in our programs. So, depending upon the delivery partner and their insurance requirements, there are some delivery companies that physically cannot, with due to their insurance, bring product into your location and help you put it away. It's a liability and they're unable to do that. So making sure you understand that beforehand so you understand what expectations are on your staff when that delivery arrives. And so you're not expecting that the delivery partner is going to come in and put everything away when in fact they can't, and then you don't have staff available and everyone's kind of scrambling. Kind of similar, will the driver be able to wait on site until the order is fully checked? Or do they kind of just drop the product and immediately move on to the next site? Again, if there's an issue with the order, are you communicating that to the driver because the driver works for the procurement partner and is going to immediately communicate that back to their supervisor or someone else? Or do you need to call the procurement partner directly because it's a third party delivery company and the delivery driver is not going to be able to assist with any sort of issues? And then finally, when you're thinking about the potential of them utilizing a third party company, are they going to use the same partner every single month consistently? Or is it going to change from month to month, in which case, you're going to be having different people and different companies showing up at your facility? And so kind of the last piece, I think, which Mary, specifically for your organization, it sounds like you all are doing pickups within your program. So some procurement partners may not be able to deliver and may not be willing to work with third-party companies, in which case they're going to ask distribution sites to pick up product from their warehouse. So here are kind of some key questions to ask prior to actually making those pickups. So what are pickup hours and are there any specific instructions that need to be followed? Does the pickup vehicle need to be able to pick up pallets, or is any vehicle acceptable? Similarly, if it does need to be able to pick up pallets, does it have to be dock height or have a lift gate? So both of these are kind of key equipment questions to ask of the procurement partner. Some organizations might be like, no, it's fine. You can come in a minivan and we'll help you load the diapers into the back of the truck. Others might be like, no, we only place products into, larger box trucks and you need to be able to take pallets. And if someone shows up in a minivan, we're not going to be able to give you the product. So really making sure you're understanding expectations and what that's going to look like. So who is the main point of contact for picking up products? So who are you reaching out to once you've arrived to receive the product? And then finally, should orders be inspected for quantity or damage at the time of the pickup? Or should that be done once you've returned to your office and actually had an opportunity to go through that everything that was received and provided? So with that, we've covered all of our items. So the remainder of the time we have scheduled will really be used for open discussion. So feel free to come off mute or drop questions in the chat. Just wanted to reiterate again that these will be posted to ACF's website once they've gone through their approval process. So both the slides and this recording will be available there. And like I mentioned a bit ago, if you have specific questions related to your site and you'd like to set up a separate time to chat, please email Christian Browning. She is our special projects and outreach manager. And so she's really the main point of contact within Supply Bank for you all. So reach out to her via email and she can schedule a time for us to connect. I'm happy to, spend 30 minutes, an hour, with individual sites, kind of talking through storage, receiving, deliveries, etc. And we do have separate trainings upcoming, like I mentioned, throughout March and April, where we'll be covering a variety of topics, including procurement and other storage related concerns. So yeah, turning it over to you all. Thank you so much for coming. And again, if there's specific questions or topics you'd like to discuss here, feel free to raise them. All right. Oh, great. Well, I'm glad it was helpful. And Mary, if you know how as you're dealing with those pickup situations with your food banks, if you want to chat specifically about that. We don't have a link yet, Christian. I believe ACF is still working on getting that set up. We can definitely email it out once we know. And we're checking in with ACF on Thursday, and so we can ask kind of what that's at and what that process is going to look like and share an update. I do know that they have a lengthy approval process that they have to go through before anything can be posted on the website with different people reviewing content. But we'll see if we can get a better timeline and can share that with everyone from there. Great. Well, if there aren't any other questions, thank you all so much, and we'll see you in the coming weeks.